So part of being the revolution means that you have to be active, not passive. You have to be proactive, not reactive. You have to be able to articulate and defend your pro-life position. So how do you go about doing that? Well, your next speaker is going to educate, equip, and empower you to be an incredibly articulate pro-life spokesperson. He is one of the most gifted people in America at doing this, at himself articulating the pro-life position, but more importantly, empowering others. He's on the cutting edge of utilizing new media to help other people know how to articulate their pro-life position. He also serves as the Director of Education for Right to Life of Central California. He's helped to lead a 40 Days for Life campaign in his community of Fresno. Another one of my heroes and a great friend. Let's welcome Josh Brahm.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. I started a 4-hour drive yesterday, and I just felt this unusual sense of glee because I was going to get to hang out with you, because there's nothing that makes me more excited about the possibility of ending abortion than hanging out with passionate students like you. I know that you're the ones, you're not just going to fight abortion, you're going to end abortion. Amen? And that makes me excited. All right, let's see if this works. This is always scary. Oh, yes, it works. Okay, so Students for Life said, we've got a title for you. We want you to use this title, but you can do whatever you want with it. They said, we want you to call this talk, I'm Pro-Life But. So what I did was I took the 4 most common emails that I get from pro-life people that start with, I'm pro-life but. So here's the 4 things that we're going to cover today. I'm pro-life but people tell me I come across like a jerk. What can I do about that? And then I don't know how to convince people that abortion is wrong. Then we're going to talk about I'm pro-life, but I think it should be legal. We hear that on campus so often. I want to give you a tip on how to respond to that. And then last, I'm pro-life, but what about rape? I was at the Denver airport a couple of years ago, just on a 45-minute layover to get home, and I sat across from a businesswoman in her late 30s, and I sat across, I had grabbed a sandwich, I had just enough time to eat and get on my plane to see my kids. And my wife, and I love my kids. They're 5, 3, and 1. They're all sons. My house is super quiet and clean, and my wife loves it when I'm gone. So I really want to get home to my kids. And so I sat across from this woman, and she asks me, "What do you do?" And it's like, I hate that question, because like, who wants to talk to the abortion guy, right? And what do you tell this person? I didn't know what to say. So I told her something I'd never told people before. I kind of summarized my job this way. I said, I'm trying to help pro-life people to be more persuasive and less weird. and she said, what does that mean? I said, well, I'm trying to help pro-life people to use more good arguments and less bad ones. And I'm trying to help us to connect better relationally with the person across from us who maybe didn't grow up in church. And I told that story a year ago at a Students for Life leadership conference, and there's a bunch of young people like you, and when I said we should not be weird, this is our motto, DBW, don't be weird. Like, that should be your motto. I told the story, and everyone thought it was hilarious, because we know, right? We've seen it, we've been it, we don't want to be it. We've been, it's not like everyone's weird, but sometimes people can be just a little off-putting. So I told this story, and everyone thought it was great, except this one woman in the front row who was really offended. And let everybody know. She was really bold. She was like, that offends me. I said, why? She said, because you're putting us all in a category. I said, ma'am, we're already in that category. I'm trying to help get us out of it. And this is really important. It might not be a sufficient condition for ending abortion, but it might be a necessary one. We have to get better at communicating our views. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. But if we don't get really good at talking to people in a way where they will actually listen to the arguments we give, we're not going to make a good impact on them. Sometimes we come across a little weird. I'll give you one example. I partner with an organization called Justice for All sometimes. We go out on college campuses and we'll set up different dialogue tools that are just there to get people to come to us so we can have a dialogue about an issue that no one wants to talk about, right? So Justice for All several years ago went to Texas A&M University. They set up an 18-foot tall pro-life exhibit, and protesters came. And some people would think, oh, we don't want protesters to come. We actually really like it when protesters come to our events because, well, for a few reasons. One, I think it takes a lot of guts to protest anything. Like the people there yesterday, like that's gutsy. They can be really good people to talk to if they're willing to talk to you. I know some people will not talk to you at all, but if they're willing to talk to you, they've thought about this a lot more than the average college student. And they draw a crowd, so it gives us more opportunities for a dialogue. So it's a win-win-win. These protesters had brought handmade signs they made in the night before. So I'm going to move this. So one protester had this sign that says 70% of pro-lifers are men and 100% of them will never get pregnant. Next person had a very popular sign, got passed around by several people throughout the day. It said, "My body, my choice," which is a very popular slogan, although I'm not sure what the sign means when it's being held by a dude. See, the most interesting thing is doing pro-life activism. You'll see guys like, "Keep the U.S. out of my uterus." I'm like, you don't have, whatever. Anyway, the next person, a gal, who they should have swapped signs, but see, it was very passionate about her own sign that said, "You care about the fetus before birth, and then you slash education funding after birth." So there's the protesters. And then the Christians showed up. The Christians began a rather innovative form of evangelism that went something like this. "How can you be for abortion? What's wrong with you? They're dismembering little kids. You're for dismemberment? Really?" They responded in kind. "You're just a bunch of white, religious, fundamentalist, straight bigots. Get out of here. We don't want to talk to you." So this was going great. And then the girl with the education sign points at one of the Christian shirts. You see, he wasn't wearing his faith on his sleeve. He was wearing it on his chest. It said in bold letters, K-N-O-W, Jesus. She says, "Think of your master Jesus. He said, 'Judge not lest you be judged.'" Oh, shouldn't have done that because this is what he did. True story. He pulls out his pocket-sized New Testament, finds the verse, and does this. "Read it in context! Read it in context!" Now, did the Christian have a good message? Did he have a good message? Yes. Don't take other people's words out of context. Don't take someone else's words and twist them into meaning something they didn't originally intend, especially if the person whose words you're twisting is the Lord Jesus Christ. Don't do that at all. But do you think she heard his message? No. I think she heard this. "I hate you, and Jesus does too." I wish he turned to a different verse. I wish he turned to 2 Corinthians 5:20, which is, "Therefore, you are an ambassador for Christ, as though God were speaking through you. Therefore, on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God." What if he had turned to that verse? So I want to talk a little bit about what stand to reason and Justice for All believes are 3 essential skills for good dialogue. I used to think of these as 3 helpful skills, and now I've changed my mind. I think that there are 3 essential skills. If you want to have good dialogue about abortion, I think these are necessary conditions for making that happen. So the first one is ask good questions. And here's why you should ask good questions. You don't actually know what the person in front of you thinks, intends, or feels. But sometimes we assume we know what they think, intend, or feel. It's like, hey, I've talked to pro-choice people before. There's like 4 boxes, and you can put all pro-choice people into these 4 boxes, and if they say something I've heard before, well, they must mean exactly the same thing that the other guy said before. Like, no. Like there's pro-choice slogans can mean multiple things. My body, my choice can mean at least 4 different things, really, really different things that I'm not talking about today. I don't have time. But just don't assume you know what the other person thinks, intends, or feels. After 7 years of marriage to the most beautiful woman in Christendom, I can tell you, if you assume you know what your spouse thinks, intends, or feels, it's going to be a bad time. why not just ask a question? Instead of telling them, sometimes we actually tell them what they think. Oh, it's so bad. Just ask them some questions. After about 1,000 conversations that I've logged with pro-choice people, I am amazed by how many questions I actually need to ask this person if I want to have a shot at understanding where they're coming from and why they're pro-choice. They might even say things I've heard before, but they might have come to that conclusion with different premises or different experiences. I've got to ask them questions. Now, just don't make the mistake that some people make with questions, because here's what some people do. They turn asking questions into like a debate tactic, because it's way easier to ask questions than to make a positive case for your view. So I've seen some people, they'll ask 20 questions in rapid fire, and the other person feels like they're in the witness stand against a prosecutor. Don't do that. But you need to ask some questions if you want to have a chance of understanding where this person's coming from. And then after you ask questions, what should you do then? Listen. Right. Listen. And I think our generation has lost the art of listening. We don't know what this means anymore. Some people think listening means you're paying just enough attention to the noise coming out of their face that you don't interrupt them, but as soon as they're done, there's like, bah, 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 intellectually beat them up. That's not what I'm talking about. I think my favorite definition of listening comes from a movie. Hollywood writers just tend to have the best way of saying things. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but there's this movie called Pulp Fiction. And there's this amazing line in Pulp Fiction. It's in a deleted scene. When Mia Wallace meets John Travolta's character for the first time, they're going to spend the day, hanging out. She doesn't just hey, how are you, or ask him about himself. She asks him this question to discover the kind of person he is. She says, when you're in conversations, do you listen or do you just wait to talk? Do you listen or do you just wait to talk? And the first 3 times I saw that movie, I didn't understand what that meant. I had to see it in writing before it kind of dawned on me that, we usually just wait to talk. Here's what that means. I'm having a conversation with a pro-choice person, right? And they're talking. And I've got an inner monologue going on in my head, right? And it sounds something like this. Wow, that's a lot of things that person's saying. Which one am I going to choose? What would be the best talking point that I've heard? What would Kristen say? What was it that I was supposed to do on my way home? That's not listening. And I discovered this last year because I got into this dumb husband habit last year of I would get home from work and my wife would usually at that time of day she'd be making dinner, and so I'd be hanging out with her because my kids know there's a rule in our household. I will wrestle with you, and right now it's lightsaber fights, but I'm going to play with the kids, but not until Daddy talks to Mommy first. So we're talking. And I built this habit of she be telling me about her day while I'm on Facebook. I know. As Mike Birbiglia says, I'm in the future also. But I built this habit of I just thought I was listening. I really did. I was I'm kind of hearing her. But then I would find out later that I wasn't really listening to her, and we would actually both discover it, because at some point she would have asked me to do something. And I probably said, yeah. Oh, that's tough, or whatever. That's not listening. And so I've learned that if I can't properly love my wife and listen to her while doing something as mindless as browsing Facebook statuses, then there is no way I can properly love the person in front of me and have a philosophical conversation about anything. So here's what I'm trying to do. And this is a discipline. I'm still working on this, but here's what I'm working on. I'm trying to learn how to silence that inner dialogue. I'm trying to learn how to just be present with this person who's talking to me and not be thinking about what I'm going to say next. And yeah, that means after they're done, I might have to take a few beats and just process. And it's going to give me a chance to respond appropriately if they dropped any emotional bombs like I was raped. And maybe then I'm going to ask another question, or maybe I'll even make an argument. But I'm going to have to take a little bit of time, and some people think that's an awkward pause. I don't. I think that's an amazing pause, because it's showing what? It's showing that you're taking this person seriously. It's showing that you're taking their ideas seriously, and people don't do that anymore. What if pro-lifers were the ones to change that paradigm? What if we were known in 10 years as the ones who takes other people seriously? Oh, that would be awesome. So we got to listen to people. And then the other thing, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, this isn't too controversial for people our age, but we need to find genuine common ground when possible. I've talked to people that are just like, you can't ever find common ground. You're either pro-life or pro-abortion. It's black and white. There's no in between. And that's just not how the real world works. I'll tell you, most of the pro-choice people that I've talked to, they think abortion's a bad thing. They think it should happen less often. They think it should be legal for lots of different reasons, depending on the person, but they think it's negative. It shouldn't happen so much. And they'll even agree that some abortions should be illegal, like late-term abortions and sex-selected abortions. Almost everyone agrees that's so bad it should be illegal. Well, there's a lot in there that I actually agree with. It's our job to point that out. The most powerful words on the college campus are, ooh, I like what you said there. Oh, yeah, I agree with that, but like you're not just finding common ground. If you only find common ground, you've just made a new friend. Like you're going to talk about things that you don't agree about too, but think of it as, my friend Steve Wagner actually wrote a book about this, Common Ground Without Compromise. You can get it for free at commongroundbook.com, and you should, absolutely. If you're going to talk to people, this is a must read, commongroundbook.com. But his analogy is that common ground is like fuel in a car. If you're going to take a long drive, you're going to start by fueling up the car, and then you're going to drive for a while. And then at some point, when you're running low on gas, you're going to take a pit stop. Think of that like common ground. Start with some common ground. Show the person that you are not polar opposites, that you actually can build some mutual goodwill, because we are not usually the caricatures of each other. Like, yeah, I know there's crazy people on both sides, but for the most part, you know, it's like we have this caricature of the pro-choice people all like, it's like they really like sex and hate babies. That's not it. And they think that we're a bunch of old grumpy white men who think that things should go back to the good old days when women didn't vote and, you know, where they belong, barefoot in the kitchen, breastfeeding twins. That's not where we're actually coming from. So when you find common ground, you actually show the person that, oh, we're not like, it's not black and white. We can actually, you know, maybe find some common ground. Maybe we can actually get somewhere in this conversation. Okay, if you do those three things, you're going to start having way better dialogues. Next. I'm pro-life, but I don't know how to convince people that abortion is wrong. So I'm going to tell you today about an argument that I'm really excited about. We started using this argument a couple of years ago. The first person we know of that made this argument, or an argument very similar, is J.P. Moreland at Biola. And it's just a philosophical argument that I think us at the grassroots haven't used a lot. We've used other things. And so we've started using this new argument, a newer argument, in the last couple of years, and I have never found anything to be so effective at changing pro-choice people to pro-life. I was with the Students for Life staff in DC last August. We trained just the 14 of us who spent a day talking about apologetics, and then we went into the streets of DC to talk to people. We only had a couple of hours to actually do activism before I had to get on my plane, and in that 2 hours, a little group of us talked to 7 people who were strongly pro-choice and became pro-life. I've never seen numbers like that before. So now I believe that this argument is the most undervalued argument in the entire pro-life movement, and I am excited to tell you about it. We're calling it the equal rights argument. Basically, we're saying, okay, the unborn, it's not obvious to all of our society that the unborn are equally valuable to us. It might be obvious to us, but it's not obvious to our entire society. It's not obvious to most professional philosophers. What if we took a second and focused on a group that's more obvious? Human adults. And what if we asked some questions about human adults that helped us learn more about what's going on there, and then see if we could apply what we learn to the unborn, which is less obvious? So the equal rights argument is 3 simple questions. Do we, meaning human adults, deserve equal treatment? Do we deserve equal treatment? Meaning, should the law treat us the same? Do we all have an equal right to life? Second, doesn't that mean there's something the same about us? If we all deserve equal treatment, doesn't that mean there's something the same about us? Which leads us to the third question. What's the same about us? Now, let me tell you about how this can sound in a real-time dialogue. I was at Fresno State University last spring, and I talked to this guy named Michael. It's one of those really good conversations where we both really enjoyed it. And at some point, we started talking about personhood. And I said, Mike, let's just take a break from talking about the unborn for a few minutes. But she was surprised. You don't expect pro-lifers to say that. And I said, let's talk about something more obvious. Let's talk about human adults. So we're outside at Fresno State University, and I said, look around. All the people that you can see right now, do you think they deserve equal treatment? Like him over there, and the group of girls over there, and him, do they all deserve equal treatment? And Michael said, what like everybody says, yeah. And I said, why? I said, that might be one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. He said, why? I said, because we're all so different. Right now, I see people who are tall. I see some people who are short. I see some people who are really smart. And I see some people who are trying their best. And if you expand it beyond the Fresno State University campus, you'd have people like my friend Sarah, who's in a wheelchair. You'd have people who are in medically induced comas. You'd have people who are really good at music and sports and those that are not. And yet, we think that they deserve equal treatment. Why is that? How can we possibly explain this intuition that you and I both have, as does most of Western civilization? How can we explain this idea that we all deserve equal treatment? And Michael said, I don't know, but that's interesting. Like, it was a good conversation. He's enjoying it. Like, he's not bugged. He doesn't feel like I'm like this impossible Lord of the Rings riddle. I'm just like, let's talk about this for a second. He's like, wow, that's interesting. And I said, well, it seems like if we all deserve equal treatment, then there must be something the same about us. There's got to be something that we all have in common. And this is key. It has to be something that we all have equally. It cannot be something that comes in degrees. It can't be something like size or, my favorite, intelligence. Some people are like, well, we all deserve equal treatment because we're all intelligent. That's not going to do the job of explaining equal treatment. And some of you are ahead of me. You know why? Because we're not all equally intelligent. If you don't believe me, go to YouTube and read the comments under any video. You can start with mine. Some people just think better than others. And there's people in this room that think a lot better than me. I still think we all have an equal right to life, though. So it can't be our intelligence that's grounding our human value. It's got to be something that we actually have equally. I said, Michael, what do you think that could be? And I let him think about it for a little while. I really want the other person to try to put the puzzle together for themselves. I don't want to like do it for them like this pro-life one-man show. Like, ta-da! Like, I want them to do some of the work because it's going to be more persuasive to them in the long term. And some people I talk to actually have answers, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But for Mike, he didn't. So I just gave him my answer. I said, I've got a philosophical idea that might explain this. Would you be interested? And he's like, yeah. Now at this point, this is important. I have a fork in the road in front of me. There's two different directions I can go. I can go the super cool philosophical direction, or I can go kind of a simplified direction. And it really depends on who I'm talking to. I'm not going to talk about the philosophical thing. I'll just tell you kind of what it is. And if you want to read more about it, you should be reading like Christopher Kazor and Dr. Frank Beckwith, who are the best. But basically, we can talk about this idea that all human beings have the natural inherent capacity for a rational nature. The natural inherent capacity for a rational nature. Embryos have that. They can't realize that capacity yet, but they have the inherent natural capacity for it. We all have that equally. That's really helpful and it's more precise for my philosophical nerdy friends. But for some people, that just sounds like you're just showing off your vocabulary. So for some people, I'm going to give a simpler and admittedly less precise answer. And that's what I told Michael. I said, Michael, I think we all have humanness in common. I think we're all equally human. We all have a human nature. That's not something that comes in degrees. It's an all or nothing kind of thing. You know, it's like a light switch. It's not like a dimmer switch. You're either human or you're not. And I said, and if humanness is kind of the right answer to this riddle, then that actually explains a lot of data about the world around me. Like, for example, explains why racism is wrong. I think racism is wrong because it focuses on a surface difference that doesn't matter morally. And I think your race doesn't matter to you. I think your race is actually something sacred about you. But it doesn't matter morally. It shouldn't determine your right to life. So racism focuses on a surface difference that doesn't matter morally, and it ignores the thing that we all have in common, which is the thing that matters morally, that we're equally human. It's the reason why sexism is wrong. Once again, it focuses on a surface difference. It doesn't matter morally and ignores that we're all human, which is the thing that matters morally. And if the unborn are human, then they deserve to be treated equally, and they're totally human. Like that's, we're pretty good at making that argument at this point. If the unborn are human, and if humanness is why we should get equal treatment, then the unborn absolutely should get equal treatment. So you see what we're doing. We're taking this really obvious case, human adults, and we're talking about it so we can figure out what we can learn, and then we're applying that to the unborn, an admittedly less obvious case to our society. And people are becoming pro-life faster than anything I've ever seen. Now, this is usually where I stop with audiences, but for you, I'm going to take this one more step. Can I get a little bit more advanced with you philosophically? Okay, because what I want to do is I want to help you respond to the better pro-choice argument that you hear on college campuses all the time. Not as much older pro-choice people that I talk to, but students, they ask better arguments. A lot of times they're not like humans, only matter because of these things that come in degrees, because that's obviously false. They're offering alternative explanations for equal rights, something that we call non-degreed property arguments. So degreed property would be like size or intelligence. It's something that comes in degrees, and that just is so clear that that doesn't work. Non-degreed properties would be like the light switch, not like the dimmer switch, the light switch. You either have it or you don't. Humanness is one of those. But there are some pro-choice atheists that have alternative answers to that riddle that are also non-degreed property arguments. And this is what you hear on college campuses, and you want to be able to respond well. People that say that you need to be sentient to be valuable. Usually, if you ask them enough questions, if you actually ask them about that, about what they mean by sentience, they're not going to say, the more sentient you are, the more of a person you are, because that's dumb. They'd be like, then your human value is like a bell curve. No, like almost nobody thinks that once you get them thinking about it. No, they're going to say, well, as soon as you've crossed this threshold, once you begin being sentient at all, you're in. Or as soon as you're minimally aware of the outside world, or as soon as you can feel pain at all, you cross a threshold, and then as soon as you've crossed that threshold, you are an equally valuable human with equal rights. Do you see how that's actually a better argument than the size thing? Like, I think it's wrong, but it's a better argument, and I want to respond to it well. So I'm going to ask 3 test questions, at least in my mind. When I think of like all these alternative explanations for equal rights, I'm going to think, one, as I kind of test this, kind of a rubric in my head, does their explanation for equal rights assume that all adults should be treated equally? Like, would it explain why human adults should be treated equally? That's kind of the very basic. If it doesn't do that, it's probably the wrong view. But if it does do that, then I'm going to ask myself, does this explanation entail equal rights for infants? Because one of the things that I am most sure of, having been in the surgery room, my wife had to have all C-sections for medical reasons. I was there for the delivery of my children, and I can tell you I am more sure that infants deserve a right to life than just about anything else. So I want to know, does their explanation entail an equal right to life for infants? And if it doesn't, that's the problem I'm going to point out. And thirdly, the third question is, does their explanation actually entail an equal right for all animals? Because I think that's a problem if it does. So my brother Tim, who's smarter than me, came up with this great story. He graduated biology. He's really, really smart. And he came up with this great story to help people see those questions. He says, imagine that we go to the zoo. Imagine that after we do philosophy for a couple hours, we go to the zoo, just because that's what we do. And we're hanging out in front of the gorilla cage. And a gunman comes to the zoo. He's got a gun, and he starts shooting. And he gets 6 bullets fired before he's tackled by Chuck Norris. So, the first bullet kills the world's unluckiest cockroach. That's funny to me, too. That just idea of a cockroach being that unlucky is hilarious in my mind, but I'm a little twisted. The second bullet kills a possum. The third bullet kills Coco the gorilla. Oh, see, I heard a bunch of ahs. This is going to get worse, just so you know. This is a thought experiment that a pro-life guy is doing, so just prep yourself for that. It gets a lot worse. Coco the gorilla, if you don't know, is the gorilla that knows 1,000 words in American Sign Language and can recognize 2,000 words of English when spoken to her. The fourth bullet kills a human newborn. The fifth bullet kills a toddler. This is my second born, William. My kids are really cute, but they're genetically predisposed to be that way on my wife's side. Like they weren't born cute, but they grew into their cuteness. I'm just not one of those guys who thinks all babies are cute. They're not. Two out of three of my kids were really ugly when they were born. But then it's fine. They deserve a right to life anyway. It's okay. They got cute a month later. Whatever. And then the sixth bullet killed a stock photo model. Here's the question I want to ask the person who just told me. Let's just say that they just said that you need to have crossed the threshold of being able to think at all. You have to have had your first thought. I'm going to ask, under that view, how many murders have taken place? Or how many entities have been killed that we should think of as murder, that had an equal right to live? Because under the view that all you have to do to have an equal right to life is to have had your first thought, I count at least 5 murders. Everyone except maybe the cockroach. I don't know enough about cockroaches to tell you whether I really think they think at all. It kind of depends on how you define think, but whatever, 5 or 6. Well, that's problematic. Do you see how instantly there's a problem with this view? I don't think this describes the world that I live in, where a possum being shot is equally tragic to a toddler getting shot. And that's what their view has to say if they're trying to explain equal rights. I'm not saying we should mistreat animals. I just don't think they're as valuable as humans. Let me explain that. I used to work in Georgia, and I would drive through a Civil War battlefield every day on my way to work. It was really wild. And this one day, I'll never forget, I ran over a squirrel. I didn't try to run over the squirrel. It did a kamikaze mission in front of my car, and I didn't miss, you know? And I remember this so clearly. I looked in the rearview mirror to see if I wanted to know if it was dead. I really didn't want it to be like, you know, like suffering. I didn't want that to be true. And it was really, 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 really dead, which is good. So here's the thing. I didn't stop. I didn't like pull over my car and give it like medical treatment. I didn't call the cops, you know, say that there's been this, you know, this car accident. I just went to work. And I don't think I belong in jail. But if that same story happened with a human toddler, I would totally belong in jail, right? If I just hit a toddler and kept going, I would so belong in jail. So I don't think we should mistreat animals. I just don't think they're equal with humans. I don't think it's equally tragic when they're killed as with humans. And that's what I want to point out to the person in front of me. Now I'm going to give you one more. What if they try to solve the problem by changing targets? Maybe they'll say, okay, it can't be as soon as you've had your first thought. That doesn't work, clearly. But maybe you need to be rationally self-aware. Possums aren't rationally self-aware, so that might solve it. You've got to be rationally self-aware. Always get them to define what they mean. What do you mean by self-aware? I've heard about a dozen different definitions. But if you ask them enough questions, let's just say you get them to define. I think that as soon as you're able to rationally kind of figure out cognitively that you're a unique entity that's going to exist over time, that's part of Peter Singer's definition. It's not all of it, but it's part of it. Let's just say that they say, like, once you have that, as soon as you have that at all, you're an equal human. Okay, cool. Now I've got something to work with. Let's do the zoo story again. Under this view, how many murders have taken place? I count 3. Coco the gorilla, the toddler, and the adult woman, but not the newborn. Newborns are not, by any definition, rationally self-aware. Do you see that? That is the problem you want to point out, in a nice way. You don't be like, well, I guess this is a bunch of baby killer. Not that. Just gently point out, it seems to me that under that view, it seems like the problem is that how can you explain an equal right to life for infants? Because almost everybody can see that your view needs to give an equal right to life to infants, except for a few people who've never been around infants. Like you'll talk to, I know there's people that bite the bullet, and I've got information on my website about how to deal with that. But for most people, they're going to see that this is a big problem for their view. So I'm trying to figure out, when they give me their view, and I've asked enough questions about it, I'm thinking to myself, using the zoo story, does their explanation entail an equal right to life for adults? It should. Does their view entail an equal right to life for newborns? It should. And does their explanation entail an equal right to life for, like, the entire animal kingdom? It shouldn't. And that's what I'm doing with the zoo story. Now, here's the last thing I'll say about this argument. Some people will ask a really good question. Why does humanness matter? Why should I believe that it matters to be human? Peter Singer says that's speciesist. It's like irrational bigotry towards your own species. And this is what I'm saying right now. We're still kind of tooling around with this. I might be teaching this slightly different in a year or 2 or 5. But this is what I'm saying right now. I think humanness matters because I believe that there's this guy 2,000 years ago who walked out of his own tomb. Which is really cool. You've probably heard of him. And Jesus believed in the Torah. And the Torah says that God made humans in his image, which means that God did something special with humans that he didn't do with any other animals. He gave them intrinsic value. He made them special. He did something with them that he didn't do with any of the other animals. And if Jesus actually did walk out of his own tomb, then I think he's a good authority on this. So yeah, a part of the reason I think humans matter is because I'm a Christian. And if it turns out that Christianity is false, then that's not going to work. I'm going to have to come up with something else. But this is why I think humanist matters right now. Now, they might say, you're getting religious on me. Flag on the field. And I'm going to say, fair enough. But at least I answered the question. Because in the context of this conversation, like up until now, I've been using science and philosophy. Why? Because I want to show this person how reasonable the Christian worldview actually is. But then when you asked me a deeper question, like if you ask enough why questions, you're on your way to my metaphysical basement. I gave you a religious answer, frankly, because it's the only one that's intellectually satisfying to me. So far, I've heard a lot of atheist accounts for why humans should be intrinsically valuable, and so far I haven't heard one that doesn't have really significant problems. Maybe there's one out there, but I just haven't heard it yet. But this one doesn't have that big problem with it. Okay, next. I'm pro-life, but I think abortion's wrong. I wouldn't personally have it, but I think it should be illegal. Basically, this is my answer in one bullet point. Some things are so wrong that they should be illegal. Like I have empathy with small government people that think that there's too many laws right now. I can understand where they're coming from. But most of my libertarian friends, most of my even anarcho-capitalist friends would agree that we at least need some kind of protection for innocent people who would be hurt by others. So can we agree that at least one of the kinds of laws we should have is a law protecting people from others that would do them harm? Well, we think abortion should be illegal because we think, and we have really good reasons to do it, to believe this, that the unborn during an abortion receive bodily harm. And that's the kind of thing that should be illegal. It's like a lot of times people are confusing truth claims with preference claims. You would never say, I'm personally against spousal abuse. But as long as you do it in the privacy of your own home, like we shouldn't pass any laws against it. No, we just know that spousal abuse is really, really wrong. So wrong that we should protect the people that would be abused by their spouses. And we think abortion is the same thing because we think that the unborn are fully valuable human beings. Which brings me to my last point. What about rape? Todd Akin is not the first person to screw this question up. So the woman in Denver that I talked about in the beginning, so we talked about overpopulation for a little while. She's a pragmatist at heart. She's pro-choice because she believes that the world's got way too many people on it, and pro-lifers like me get our way, then there's going to be way more people on it, it's going to be really, really bad. And I said, well, why stop at birth? So she said, what? I said, why draw the line at birth? Why not, let's really make a dent in the overpopulation problem and kill everyone that's 2 or under. Let's do what Herod wanted to do, but make it global. And really take a dent against overpopulation. She's like, well, you can't do that. I said, why? She's like, that's a weird question. You said you're not weird. I said, I know it's a weird question, but just humor me for a second. Precisely why would it be wrong to kill the unborn or even the toddlers to solve overpopulation? She's like, well, you can't kill humans. Right. And so if the unborn are human like the toddlers, then we can't kill the unborn to solve overpopulation, right? And she said, like she's not convinced yet, but she's thinking. And then she asked me the question that pro-life men are terrified of. What about rape? And I took a cue from my mentor, Steve Wagner, and I said, I think rape is one of the worst things I know about. I am devastated when I hear about rape. I don't think our society thinks of rape as bad as it actually is. Sometimes we say things to each other that blame the victim. Sometimes we'll say things like, well, if she hadn't been wearing that dress, if she hadn't had that drink, if she hadn't been in that part of town, we blame the victim. Secondly, when we prosecute the rapist, we usually don't. When we prosecute the rapist, I don't think he gets punished enough. Why? Because our society doesn't understand how grievously wrong rape is. And if she gets pregnant, he's committed multiple moral crimes. He not only forced himself on her sexually, but he forced her to become a mother. So put yourself in her shoes. She now has to make maybe the most difficult decision of her life. She's either going to do the right thing, which is what everybody wants to do, and carry to term. So 9 months of pregnancy, a painful delivery, and then she's either going to parent the child, which is expensive financially, I now know. She might gift the child for adoption, which is a heroic, selfless, loving action, although it's really emotionally painful for most birth moms that go through it. Or she's going to make the wrong choice and hire a doctor to kill her child. Punish them for all of that. But why would our society suggest that the best response to violence is more violence? Notice what I did. I spent 90% of my time doing what pro-lifers usually skip, acknowledging the horror of rape. And then in one question, I clarified the moral logic of the pro-life position. I said, why would our society suggest that the best response to violence is more violence? My colleague Scott Klusendorf asks a similar question. He says, how should a just and civil society treat people who remind us of painful events? We don't kill them. So there's a relational response that we need to have. In fact, sometimes I actually believe you've got to take off your apologist hat and just be relational with a person. They might not be ready to hear your philosophical argument against abortions in the case of rape. Some people I talk to, they just need to hear that you actually care about women who are raped. Can you see the horror of rape? Do you know how devastating rape is, or are you so focused on your agenda of unborn children that you can't see the horror of rape? We need to be able to see the horror of rape. Some people, though, will ask a question like the woman in Denver did. She said, you know, I get it. Okay, you think rape is bad. I appreciate that. I really do. But because we agree that rape is so bad, can't we agree that that's at least one case where you should be able to have an abortion? So now she's asking an intellectual question. And I think a story here helps. I did a debate with Georgians for Choice like 7 years ago. It's a network of pro-choice organizations in Georgia, and they got together. I didn't know the full context until that day. They'd had this pro-choice celebration weekend, and they got really excited about being pro-choice. And they were so excited, they wanted to extend it to another weekend. They said, let's find a pro-life sucker and debate them. It'll be great. So that was me. And it wasn't the most happy moment in my life when I showed up to an auditorium full of 300 very pro-choice women who were still riding the wave of their pro-choice weekend. I was the only dude in the room. And my wife was the only pro-life woman in the room. And as you can imagine, rape came up a lot. I showed a graphic video. I showed them what abortion was. I made a case for why the unborn is human, and then we did basically Q&A the entire time, which isn't a very good debate format, but they picked the format. And so I think rape came up like 4 or 5 times. And so I give different types of responses to try to help the audience see what I'm seeing. And finally, it was the last time when I tried something that actually worked. I said, imagine a woman is raped and becomes pregnant. And let's imagine she decides not to have an abortion. And a lot of women who are pregnant from rape don't have abortions. That happens. So let's imagine this woman is one of those who decides to parent the child as she gives birth to a baby boy. The rapist is in jail where his butt belongs, and she's in counseling and therapy. She's slowly healing. It's tough. It's not easy, but it's as good as it can possibly be. And then her child turns 3 years old. And because now he's grown older, suddenly for the first time he looks like the rapist. And for the first time, it's tearing her apart. Every time she sees her son, she thinks about the rape. She's having nightmares every night. She begins to hate her son to the point where she wants to kill her son. I said, should she be allowed to kill her son? And the audience collectively went like this. I said, why? Someone from the audience said, well, that's different. I said, why is that different? And someone said, because he's human. I said, then if the unborn are human, like the toddler, then we cannot kill the unborn because they remind us of a painful event. We've got to come up with something better. Let's be the church. Let's do what Jesus said and extravagantly love this woman and do everything we can to help her, but we don't kill people to make her feel better about it. I only have like 3 minutes left, so I want to tell you just a thumbnail sketch about something that's really important to me right now. It's become important to me this last year. I'm going to be speaking a lot about this in the future. I actually believe that there's some people that need more than one conversation with us on a college campus. I think there's some people that need relationship. So I want to tell you a little bit about my friend Deanna. My friend Deanna is a pro-choice atheist lesbian in Canada. So you would think on paper that we wouldn't have a whole lot in common, being that she's from Canada. She emailed me like 11 months ago. She saw some of my videos on YouTube and she liked them. And she's a pro-choice blogger, one of the most fiercely intelligent people I've ever met. And she sent me this long email. She's like, I really like your videos and here's why I'm pro-choice. She's coming from a bodily autonomy perspective. We're not getting into that today. If you want to learn about bodily rights argument, I've got a website for you, joshbrahm.com, joshbrahm.com/DFG, which stands for de facto guardian. And you can watch it, you can listen to a speech and read a paper that gives what I think is so far one of the better responses to bodily rights arguments. But I'm not going to get into that, but that's where she's coming from. She thinks abortion's bad, but it should be legal. So I emailed her back. I was like, you're awesome, and we should totally talk about this stuff. And we began an email exchange that went for about 150 emails, long emails. And then a few months ago, we started Skyping together. 3-hour Skype sessions on average. It's really important for you to understand that Deanna is not just an object to me. She's not just a mind to be changed, like a long-term project that one day, if she becomes pro-life, there'll be this really cool story I can tell on stage. No, I love Deanna. I have a very non-romantic affection for this woman. I'm married and she's a lesbian. It's not like, don't worry, it's okay. But we love each other. I love this definition of love. There's this guy named Jason Lepijarvi, and he said, love says that it is good that you exist. And insofar as I am able, I will contribute to your happiness, your existence, your flourishing. Love says that it's good that you exist. And so far as I'm able, I will contribute to your happiness, your existence, your flourishing. And now, with the first Skype call we had, so cool. She wanted to Skype with me because she wanted me to give her sidewalk counseling materials. Don't miss this. She wants to go to her local abortion clinic and encourage women not to have the abortions she thinks should still be legal. She wants to go to her abortion clinic and encourage women not to have the abortions she thinks should still be legal. What's our excuse? Then this last time, literally the last time I talked to her was 2 weeks ago, and she asked me for the first time why I'm a Christian. This is a story that has not yet ended. We're in the middle of a really, really cool story. I'm going to love and know this woman for the rest of my life. And I want to just encourage you as I close to spend some time thinking about the kind of impact that you could have in your lifetime. Because I believe that you will make the greatest impact on people who you are friends with, not those that you occasionally intellectually spar with on Facebook. You'll have the greatest impact on your friends, not those that you intellectually spar with on Facebook. And if you equip yourself to be a good ambassador, you're going to make a powerful impact for this pro-life revolution. Thank you very much.
Didn't I tell you Josh was awesome?